we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on First Post. Hello and welcome to First Post Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alyson Grange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Russian President Vladimir Putin heads to North Korea to meet its leader Kim Jong-un, marking his first trip to the isolated nation in 24 years. At least 17 Palestinians killed in a double strike by Israel on Gaza's Nuseirat refugee camp, housing families evacuated from Rafah. At least 5 people killed and over a dozen people go missing after heavy rains and flooding hit China's southern provinces, while the north bakes under some of its highest temperatures this year. In Nairobi, the police used tear gas and arrested at least 3 people as scores gather outside the parliament, protesting controversial tax hikes by Kenyan government. And Boeing CEO Dave Calhoun faces Capitol Hill grilling as the plane maker fields accusations of putting profits over safety following a series of incidents in recent years. Hello and welcome. Our top focus today remains on South Africa, where President Cyril Ramaphosa is bolstering support for the African National Congress-led coalition government. Ramaphosa claims support of 5 parties, after which the government of national unity represents more than 2/3 seats in the National Assembly. Now, Ramaphosa is set to be sworn in at an inauguration ceremony on Wednesday. He will preside over the 7th administration of South Africa since the end of apartheid. Cyril Ramaphosa also found voices of support from across the globe as world leaders congratulated him for his second term as president. And the biggest voice of support was from Russia. On Monday, Russian President Vladimir Putin dialed Ramaphosa to congratulate him on his re-election. Putin and Ramaphosa discussed further strengthening of partnership between Russia and South Africa in quote-unquote all aspects. The telephone call between the 2 leaders reflects on continued good relations between Moscow and Pretoria, despite uncertainty over Russia's more than 2-year-old invasion of Ukraine. Since then, both Russia and Ukraine have jostled for support from African nations. Foreign ministers of both countries have embarked on several tours of the continent. Why? Because 54 African Union member states are together a strong voice at the United Nations. Both Russia and Ukraine seek to lobby African allies for favorable votes at the UN. South Africa, like a number of African states, has shared long-standing links with Moscow that date back to the Soviet times. Back then, Moscow was a prominent supporter of liberation movements and the fight to end apartheid, which was spearheaded by the African National Congress. Pretoria initially denounced Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February of 2022, but has since adopted a more nuanced approach, and South Africa abstained in several votes at the UN General Assembly condemning Russian actions. South Africa also attended the Ukraine Peace Summit hosted by Switzerland this weekend, but it declined to sign the final communiqué. In 2023, South Africa found itself in a dilemma as it hosted a meeting of the BRICS grouping, Pretoria considered inviting Putin for the meeting despite an ICC arrest warrant against him on allegations of deportation of Ukrainian children. However, in the end, Putin chose not to visit South Africa and attended the summit virtually. Now, after re-election, all eyes are back on President Cyril Ramaphosa's foreign policy and how he navigates tricky global diplomatic endeavours. Despite the Ukraine war, South Africa's relations with Russia have only been deepening. Last year, South Africa participated in war games with Russia and China. U.S. Ambassador to South Africa also accused the country of loading weapons onto a sanctioned Russian cargo ship. In July of 2023, Ramaphosa also attended a Russia-Africa summit in St. Petersburg. Now, when the war in Gaza began, South Africa's foreign minister dialed Hamas political bureau chief Ismail Haniyeh, and this was followed by a visit to Iran. By December of 2023, South Africa took Israel to the International Court of Justice, accusing it of a genocide in Gaza. Then, in January this year, Ramaphosa drew criticism when he hosted the leader of Sudanese paramilitary RSF, General Mohammed Dagalo, popularly known as Hamedi. Now, the RSF has been accused of human rights abuses in Sudan, where a civil war has been raging. So, South Africa's foreign policy has been puzzling to say the least. While some analysts pinpoint at glaring inconsistencies in South Africa's diplomacy, the others call it consistent with a focus on Africa's needs and interests. As major conflicts around the world remain far from being resolved, for Cyril Ramaphosa, the complex balancing act is only going to get tougher, both at home and abroad. Now, for more on this, we have with us Patrick Bond. He is a distinguished professor and director of the Centre for Social Change at the University of Johannesburg. Welcome to Firstpost.
Oh, thanks, Alyson. Great to be with you and your viewers.
Putin has called President Ramaphosa to congratulate him on his second term, and they spoke of strengthening the partnership between South Africa and Russia. Professor, what are your thoughts on this show of support by Putin, and what does this mean for the ties between the two countries?
It's so interesting that, as you pointed out, President Ramaphosa's re-election and his inauguration tomorrow cannot be attended by Vladimir Putin. Not only that he's in North Korea, but that there's an arrest warrant that South Africa must respect. If not, there's a constitutional crisis because the judiciary would enforce that International Criminal Court order from last year, in which Putin and one of his colleagues are accused of the kidnap of 20,000 children from Ukraine. And that's been a source of enormous friction, partly because the United States is using that, and if Donald Trump is elected in November, would use it even more to threaten South Africa with removal from the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which is mainly for the export of steel and aluminium and automobiles and petrochemicals. So it would affect multinational corporates. And that's one of the great sticking points associated with this conflict between whether Ramaphosa looks east and to the BRICS or west and to the US and Europe. And the crucial moment probably comes when the Democratic Alliance, its new center-right party as a coalition partner after the disappointing ANC 40% showing, they don't like Russia, and they will probably demand a bit of a change of policy, a look more to the West. And Ramaphosa, a businessman, would probably be comfortable as he jettisons part of his own internal left wing.
And analysts have reflected on these inconsistencies in South Africa's diplomacy and foreign policy, while others say that it merely focuses on Africa's needs and interests. How would you describe the balancing act that Ramaphosa is facing, considering the global political landscape, especially with regard to the West and Russia?
Well, as I say, the cynics might see this as talk left, walk right, because most of the business dealings and when there's a de-dollarization move here, when we hosted the BRICS in Johannesburg last August, the South African business and banking community and the finance minister and Reserve Bank governor just said, no, we don't want to move in that direction. So there tends to be radical rhetoric, and that's most clear with solidarity with Palestine. But the contradiction, again, because you are dealing with the dialectic, is that there are huge coal exports by both South Africa and Russia to Israel going on right now, even while Colombia, the number one coal exporter to Israel, has said, no, we'll do sanctions because of that genocide. Now, it's a very, let's say, complicated tap dance because Ramaphosa is also connected to the coal exports through his brother-in-law and through the company Glencore, which he used to be the main partner of. And these are the, let's say, balancing acts that we don't really see very much of. We see the, let's say, dust in the air of the geopolitics, but it's really these material factors I would look at.
Right. And in terms of future collaborations between the two nations, what is the benefit for Russia and the benefit for South Africa?
Well, obviously, Russia would want not only Cyril Ramaphosa, but more African countries to be more explicit in their support in the UN. And as you pointed out, in the Swiss meeting for peace in Ukraine, the South African, Sidney Mufamadi, was simply vacant. He just didn't want to sign and was a bit critical. And I think that also reflected the foreign ministers' meetings of the BRICS in Russia on June 10, because the foreign minister who's outgoing, Naledi Pandor, a very brave, heroic solidarity activist with Palestine, she was silent on Ukraine. And a year ago, the attempt by South Africa, Ramaphosa, to be a peacemaker, Ukraine, Kiev one day and Moscow the next, has really fallen apart. There's nothing much to that. So for the future, I would look at more, again, material interests, because Russian petroleum and gas interests are in South Africa's main gas processing site on the Indian Ocean. But also, there were always promises of nuclear energy collaboration, and those may well be revived. On the other hand, the Democratic Alliance probably would have some veto power now that they're the coalition partner, with about 22% of the vote, the ANC with 40%, and that's going to be the balancing act internally that we're all concerned about. It doesn't look like a very stable government of national unity, and maybe US, Russia, South Africa, Russia, and South African US ties will all be bound up in a big fight over who's loyal to whom at what point and for what interests.
Thank you very much, Professor, for being with us on Firstpost Africa and your valued insights.
Thank you.
Moving on to Zimbabwe now, where opposition leader Jamison Timber has been arrested by the police, along with around 80 youth activists. Timber and his supporters have also been charged with disorderly conduct over a private meeting held at his residence. The police say Timber's supporters pelted stones at officers and that the meeting organized was an unauthorized one. Those arrested also include Timber's son. Jamison Timber is the interim leader of the Opposition Citizens Coalition for Change, or the CCC. He assumed the role after Zimbabwe's opposition leader, Nelson Chamisa, quit the coalition in January this year. Chamisa, while quitting, said his party has been contaminated and hijacked by the government. On Sunday, CCC activists reportedly gathered at Timber's residence without official authorization. Police intervention followed, as law in Zimbabwe mandates political parties to apply for clearance with police before holding a public gathering. However, police intervention escalated the situation into violence, with activists allegedly resisting arrest and clashing with law enforcement officers. Several CCC members have reportedly sustained injuries during the confrontation. As per the police, the group is being held at 2 different police stations in the capital, Harare. Timber's lawyer says efforts are ongoing for their release, and they are likely to be charged with maintenance of public order laws. Now, opposition leaders have been frequently targeted in the southern African nation after the disputed 2023 elections. Zimbabwe's ruling ZANU-PF, which has been in power since independence in 1980, has been accused by critics for further tightening grip by silencing dissent. In the August 2023 elections, President Emmerson Mnangagwa won a second term with 52.6% of the votes, while CCC leader Nelson Chamisa won 44%. The opposition condemned the outcome as flawed and demanded a fresh vote. Now, concerns were also raised by other regional and international observers, such as South Africa and the United States. However, ZANU-PF denies that it tried to influence the election outcome. Shifting focus to Western Africa, where the rift between neighbours Niger and Benin is deepening. And in the middle of this face-off is China. Niger's military government has decided to suspend its oil exports to China. These exports were routed via a China-built pipeline through Benin. Now, the move signals an escalating standoff between the West African neighbours, which was triggered after Niger's coup in July of last year. At the heart of the row is a nearly 2,000-kilometre pipeline. This pipeline runs through the oil fields in Niger to the port of Seme in Benin. Without Benin's port support, landlocked Niger cannot export oil. The pipeline was also meant to transport oil to China as a part of a $400 million agreement. However, things changed after a coup in Niger in July of 2023, when the country's democratically elected president, Mohamed Bazoum, was ousted. The West African bloc, ECOWAS, of which Benin is a member, condemned the junta takeover. The bloc imposed sanctions on Niger, while Benin threatened a military intervention against Niger's military junta. Niger's military leaders responded promptly by closing the borders with Benin. In May of this year, Benin blocked the Niger's oil exports through its port as the border closure started to impact its economy. Now, Benin's president decided to take a softer stance and sought to restore normalcy. However, Niger has so far refused to budge. Benin has used the pipeline to pressurize the junta. On Monday, a Benin court handed an 18-month suspended jail sentence to 3 out of 5 Nigerians who were arrested last week for allegedly entering Port Seme under a false identity. Niger rejected the accusation, stating that the group was supervising crude loading as per their agreement with Benin. Now, the ongoing rift between the two neighbours also threatens Chinese efforts of making inroads into West Africa. China is the second largest investor in Niger after France. In the last 2 decades, it has pumped in billions of dollars into the landlocked nation. After the coup, China has also made efforts to forge ties with the military leaders. However, amidst the dispute with Benin, Niamey might not be able to put Beijing's interest at the center. And finally, to our special segment, Resurgent Africa. Amid reports of coups and crises that dominate the headlines from the continent, we get you positive stories that often get overlooked. Our story today is from Kenya. In the capital city of Nairobi, a clinic is making significant strides in transforming the lives of amputees. By using 3D printing technology, the clinic is able to deliver prosthetic limbs that are tailored to the unique needs of each patient. Through this, the clinic is helping individuals reclaim their independence. Our final report gets you all the details.
Humans endure a wide range of painful experiences, from significant events like the death of a loved one or a breakup, to minor setbacks like losing a favorite pen or outgrowing a beloved sweater. Life is never easy. Consider, for example, the lives of those who have lost their limbs. This life-changing experience can have profound physical, emotional, and social impacts. Whether it's a hand, foot, arm, or leg, losing a limb can leave individuals feeling overwhelmed and uncertain about the future, as nothing seems to make sense at that moment. However, with patience, acceptance, and the right attitude, many courageous individuals manage to recover from limb loss and learn new ways to live their lives. In Nairobi, Kenya's capital, a clinic called Prothea Kenya is helping people without limbs reclaim their lives. They are providing them with prosthetic limbs. They are aiding these individuals in adapting and resuming their daily activities. This clinic is notable for being the first in the country to use 3D printing technology for prosthetic limbs. Dr. Nick, the founder of the company, established it to improve the quality of life for amputees.
Comparing between traditional way of making prosthesis and 3D printing, with 3D printing we have significant customization based on the scanning of the patient's limb. This increases comfort for the patient. The second is the time it takes. With 3D printing we can have the prosthetic made within 24 hours.
The clinic employs a unique approach to providing prosthetics. They first assess the specific needs of each patient, then they scan the affected area using a phone app. After completing the scans, a 3D model of the prosthetic is created, which is further sent to the 3D printer for the final printing process. Another distinguishing feature of this clinic is the cost of their products. The 3D printed prostheses are more affordable than traditional ones.
We get the raw material from polypropylene filaments that we import. And once we feed it to the 3D printer, then it is able to 3D print the socket. Now, compared with the traditional socket, this 3D printed one is significantly cheaper.
Traditional prosthetics cost between $1,600 to $3,500, while 3D printed prosthetics range from $800 to $1,400. The turnaround time is also much quicker with 3D printing.
The advantage of 3D printing is that you can quickly produce the prosthesis. The turnaround time is so much reduced. A patient can come and in less than 2 hours the patient is being trained to walk. We are doing what we call gait training. The disadvantage of this is that sometimes the patient is given a high hope. You want to finish it very fast, but the prosthetic user must use the prosthesis for some time so that you can see the pressure tolerable areas and the pressure sensitive areas.
The clinic has benefited dozens of people, printing more than 100 prosthetic pieces.
Even though I got the previous prosthesis, it was very hectic in that after walking for a bit, I would feel a lot of pain. It is after these struggles that I was then introduced to Prothea, who make prosthetics. When I went there, I found that their prostheses are very flexible, very affordable. They are cheap. They are very good.
When I went to Prothea, I called the free knee joint and the single multi-axis foot. The one I was using, the one with the locked knee, I was walking, it was so stiff, and even if I want to walk faster, like the way I'm walking now, it was limiting me to walk faster. And at the same time, the foot itself was not flexible compared to this. This one is flexible. I think I'm comfortable and confident working with it.
For those who can't come to the clinic, Prothea provides mobile services reaching out to those in need. The innovative work being done at this Nairobi clinic is a beacon of hope and progress for amputees. By combining cutting-edge technology with a compassionate approach, they are transforming lives, hence proving that with the right support and resources, overcoming even the most daunting challenges is possible.
And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching and goodbye.